Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another session of teaching social science in the senior phase. Our lesson today has got to do with geography, and particularly what is geography. Now, if you remember the last lesson, we dealt with history and particularly what is history, especially in our South African context. But before I carry on with the lesson today, I want to just touch on your first task, and I'm sure you guys all had a look at it on your assessment guide, which is up on your ECI page, and you will see that the first assessment is due on the 9th of May. So you have just over a week to tackle your topic, and I hope you guys have started because this one is going to be a bit of, you need a lot of time, a bit of time. So the reason why I've chosen map skills is because map forms a very important part of geography, especially in the senior phase, as it is the first unit in grade 7, 8, and 9. And it is very important that you know your way around map skills and the topic of maps, particularly in these three grades. So your first task is divided into part A and part B. With part A, you are required to draw a map using map skills. You can use Google Maps to help you, and this will be about will be the route from your house to your nearest Stadio campus, right? So in this map, you are going to draw up a title of the map. You're going to drop a key and a scale, and then you're going to add places onto this map, right? For example, places like your shopping centers, if there's a hospital, label the residential areas, a library perhaps that's on the way. And you're going to clearly label these on your map. And you're also going to use symbols to show important human and or physical features in your area. For example, if there's a river or a mountain or a waterfall or something like that, right? And I want you to use different colors to show the different types of land use. Okay, and also on this map, you're going to label potential risks or hazards that are that you might find in your particular area. Right, so that's drawing a map, which is part A. Then if you look at your assessment guide, you'll see I've clearly broken down the marks and where marks will be given, how it will be broken down. Then with part B, you are going to look at the land use on your map and also study the kinds of vegetation that you have shown on your map. And with this, you're going to suggest ways in which it could be improved. Right? So the second part is basically in the form of a little essay, and this will be 1 page long. And this will be for 20 marks. Right, so that's your first task. Please, guys, I urge you to get started on this as the 9th of May is not very far away. So we now look at geography and what is geography. Right, so in essence, geography has many different topics under it or subtopics, if I could put it that way. So I just have one slide for you guys today. I'll be talking through the rest of it. So the first one is climatology. Right, so climatology or areas of climatology looks at weather patterns, at climate, and all the things that we've been seeing on extreme weather study, which helps us focus on, for example, major disasters. And climatology helps us to. So this helps us focus on major disasters and assists us to plan in the eventuality of disasters happening, and in this way this planning helps us minimize the loss of life. For example, if there's hurricanes and tornadoes approaching, to get people out of the areas and things like that. So climatology is a very, very relevant part of human life. Then we have geology. And with geology, it can sometimes be a contested matter where we look at rock formations and the subterranean formation of the earth. And quite often we look at these in terms of what they can offer us. For example, precious metals, minerals that we use for various type of manufacturing. And if we think of our own country, there's been quite a lot of contention over subjects like fracking, where companies are looking to extract natural gas and in some instances oil from the earth or the ground. And a few years ago, I remember, companies looking in the Kibli area, and it drew a lot of negative attention. And, people are not very happy about things like this being done. Next, we have geomorphology. So, geomorphology deals with the shapes around the country, the altitude, the formations that are visible above the surface of the earth. And this is, of course, really important when you think of the civil engineering planning and bridge building, things like that, laying pipes, uh, pipelines for water, for oil, and even for buildings itself, for settlements, for sites for factories, for roads and urban planning. So geomorphology basically, um, assists in all of this. Then we come to meteorology, which is very closely associated with climatology, where we look at weather patterns on a very big scale. And quite often involved in that is large amounts of digital and electronic data that help predict approaching weather systems. Next, we have cartology. Uh, and cartology seems to be completely overtaken by digital technology these days. And cartology extends into so many areas of our lives. We only have to think of things like Google Maps and the immense number of applications that we have for cartology in our daily lives. Next, we have seismology, which is basically plate tectonics and all the happenings that occur between the plates of the earth and the resulting occurrences on the earth's surfaces, like volcanoes, tsunamis, earthquakes, and so on. Next, we have glaciology, where we take a closer look at what happens in icy environments. Um, and it's been actually in the forefront of our news over the past few years, with things like global warming and all the accompanying disasters that meteorologists and climatologists are predicting for our future in terms of temperature and sea levels and so on. Then we have geographic information systems, which is closely aligned with cartology, otherwise known as GIS. And this is the underlying platform for online mapping systems. Next, we look at hydrology, which is about water formations both above and below the surface, and in terms of fresh water and marine environments. Next, we have remote sensing, which tends to take us out into space using very high-tech technology, which is able to relay messages back to Earth about all sorts of matters that we can't see because we're too close to the Earth. So these would be basically infrared technologies that come in from readings from satellites. Yeah, basically, yeah, that's it. Then we have oceanography, which is which speaks for itself. And yeah, everything that deals with the ocean and things that are involved with our oceans and the life that goes with everything that goes underneath that and inside the oceanography. I don't know much about it, to be honest with you. Then we have the next one. Let me just call that up for you guys. Volcanology. And this basically looks at volcanoes and seismic activity both above and below the ground and also in our ocean systems, right? So there are many areas or facets of geography, if I could put it that way. We have it's there's so many parts to it, like demography, which is the study of human populations and patterns, and where it these are becoming so important because of where areas are being overpopulated, where you find, especially in South Africa, where you find an influx of people into certain areas because of work and other reasons, and this type of planning becomes so important. So there's so many fields, like I mentioned, and if we look at CAPS for social sciences, right, it basically tells us what geography needs to be taught. That means, what I mean by this is the content, along with the kind of attributes we want to develop in learners, and why we want to develop this. And I must mention here that this was a concern for many teachers, not only in social sciences, but other subjects as well, where not a great deal is said about how we go about teaching this content, right? So the CAPS curriculum is basically the one in social science is fairly silent on what geography is as a discipline itself. So the best thing we could do here is to take up a whole lot of definitions that taken up both from South African and international publications. And I must mention that even with any discipline, there's always fashion. Like there's fashion in clothing and cars. There's always fashion in developments in the way we think about things, right? Maybe fashion is not actually the right word, but developments is maybe a more accurate way to put it, in the way we think about things. So let's say, for instance, let me think of an example, like extraterrestrial travel in the 1960s, or traveling outer space would be considered outrageous and almost beyond belief during that time. Yet later it happened, right? And so in a similar fashion, right, we view geography, and even with history, you find that things that would have been impossible to consider, like if you look at history and you look at something like Mapangubwe, the evidence that came up in the recent years would have been basically something that would have been unthought of or unknown. It was unknown, but unbelievable, basically, in the 1960s or the 70s as such. So authors who wrote in the 1980s and early 1990s that geography is a subject that came about because of the questions that children from a young age asked in order to satisfy their curiosity, right? And these questions mainly revolved around the environment. Questions such as, why is the sky blue, or why are there mountains and valleys? And as a potential teacher or a teacher, some of you I know are teaching already, you are aware of these questions, either from teaching or from your own experiences and observations, which might have been either when you were a child or experiencing classes at school, or now that you're an adult, you've been through some of the modules that have qualified you to teach social sciences in the high school. So basically, you are aware of these questions, and as children become aware of the environment, they become aware of the geography of their surroundings. And that seems to be, in a simple form, what geography is all about. So you basically have two prescribed textbooks, one by Johnson and the other Russell Waters and Turner. And neither of these actually deal with the term geography and what it is. The Johnson publication on page 266 goes through what essential elements should be covered in the subject called geography. And they focus particularly on the world in spatial terms. They look at it as places and regions. They look at it as physical systems, human systems, and then begin to integrate environment and society, and then give, interestingly enough, the uses of geography, which is sometimes overlooked. And then they go on to give some examples of each of those on the pages that follow. So this is actually page 266 of Johnson. And as they get more into middle school areas of the curriculum in the US, because this book is actually US based, they start to look at moving from physical and human characteristics of places to the people that create regions, and then to interpret the complexity of the earth, and then how culture and experience influence people's perceptions of places and region. So it gets to be more and more integrated and complex as the children grow older. When they look at physical systems, initially they are looking at physical processes that shape the pattern of the Earth's surface. That would be geomorphology into topography, and then they go on to talk about, topographies that influence the characteristics, the distribution and migration of human population on the Earth's surface. When they speak of spatial terms, the word spatial terms, right, they start off with how to use maps and other geographical representations, tools and technologies to acquire processes and report information from a spatial perspective, and how to use mental maps to organize information about people, places, and the environment in a spatial context, and also how to analyze the spatial organization of people, places, and environments on the Earth's surface. And this is just to name a few examples that they offer in this particular book. But when we get to the part where we say, or we look at uses of geography, they list two things: how to apply geography to interpret the past. And here we see a strong correlation with history. What people did in the past is very much linked to the physical geography of the Earth. And then how to apply geography to interpret the present and plan for the future. There are some other opinions that were expressed from other writers who we'll address shortly. Then in your other textbook, which is by Russell Waters and Turner, on page 31 to 33, deals with a little more in depth of the definition of the word geography. And once again, it starts with the fact that geography definitely includes informations and skills that need to be developed with regards to maps, globes, which are considered to be major tools of geographers and a particular branch of geography, which I mentioned, cartography, right? Which is devoted to the science of mapping. And that is to look at the study of the Earth's surface and how it relates to human beings once again, and then how humans adapt to the living conditions and how humans alter the environment in which they live. Physical geographers tend to focus on the Earth's natural features, right? Like topography, landforms, climate, bodies of water, vegetation, animal life, and so on. Whereas the cultural geographer will be concerned with the people and with the factors that influence their location, as well as how humans use and impact resources. So here we can see a strong correlation with some history again, because we could set this in the context of the last example of cultural geography, right? For example, like either of a modern city, and look at factors that influence the initial establishment of these cities, as well as how humans use and impact the resources and all we could do is apply that in the context. It's completely different. For instance, if we look at an example of the Inuits living in icy lands, and we would look at why they would locate to these areas, the areas that they did, or if in fact they did have fixed locations, and how these folks use and impacted the sources of the or the resources in which in the areas that they lived. And so I hope you guys can have a look at that, have a read through. In fact, you have to read through that. So basic to geographic understanding is some knowledge of where places are. So we need to know that, right? But that's no longer the focus of geography. It's now not about which country borders which country and what is the capital of each country. And many older folks, including myself, will tell you that is what geography is all about, because that is what we learned at school. It was a subject I talked about the other day when, in grade 4, you'd learn your immediate environment, what's around in your area. And then in grade 5, you would go onto your province and be able to name all the little cities in your province. Grade 6, you go on to Africa, and we'd rote learn all the names of countries in Africa and their capitals. And then grade 7 again, we'd go to the world and then rote learn that. So basically, scholars all agree now that is basically not what geography is all about. And many students and teachers lack very basic information about their world. So we have to have a very colorful, interesting, basically interesting maps and representations for students to see. So there's not a lot of excuse for them not being able to visualize those things if we provide these resources. And it's very easy nowadays to get hold of the internet is abound with resources and maps and interactive maps that we could use in the classroom when teaching people and places. So in a world where people have become very mobile and people have been drawn closely by communication, and where transport is very fast, it's fairly clear that students need more place, location, knowledge than ever before. And although they can call that up on Google Maps anytime, it's a geographical knowledge that is basic to understanding the world and its people. And this is what we need them to understand. And the problems related to geography, is what is most important right now, and basically most important in facing the world today. So if you ever have to justify yourself, and people ask you, like, why is geography important? There are a whole lot of reasons, some that we've listed here. So students are aware of the many problems and need to be informed and knowledgeable about the impact of the world. So students, often we find that students are only frightened by geographic problems ranging from extreme weather to pollution to global warming, to the destruction of the ozone layer and the destruction of the rainforest, right? And the record consumption of fossil fuels and famines, droughts, things like that. They basically need not be put into a fearful situation. Instead, educated about what we can do moving forward and how to make our place better and livable for the next thousands of years to come. Okay, so as defined by the National Council for Geographic Information and the Association of American Geographers in 1984, geographic education is focused on 5 themes. And here we have similarities again to the last reading. We look at location, place, movement, regions, and the relationships within places, so we can see there are parallels being drawn between the different writers about what geography is. So the question that geographers ask deal with where people live and why they're interested in and why they live there, and they're interested in the factors that make the earth habitable. And they're also concerned with how variations in geographic factors influence economic development and influence culture and socio-political organization, so that students can be drawn into a study of other settings and other people. So everything has a geographic setting, and the realization that events and people's actions are really important to know about because they form part of our daily lives and the daily lives of our students. And this happens basically throughout their lives. So all of the Earth's resources that we study in geography and in science, and all the stories, poems that we read in literature, people are always relating to geographic factors. I'll give you an example. For in poems, in a poem, somebody is walking in a forest, and the forest has got to do with geography in it, and we all exist on this earth. So geography is about knowledge of the earth. So you have a read of those two sections in your textbook, and this will help you actually in the talks that I've set out during this week, where you're required to discuss your understanding of geography, and this will be marked by me. You'll see, I think it's involvement tracker 4. So I also want to draw your attention to some readings that are placed on ECI for week 4. These articles are critical to this lecture. The one is by Putik, Paramore, and Gee, and the publication of 2018 appeared in the International Research in Geographical Environmental Education Journal. It's about 12 pages long, and you will have to sit down and read this. The second article is called "What is the Geography Perceptions of First-Year Undergraduates in South Africa?" And this article was penned by Knight and Robertson in the Journal of Geography and Higher Education. Publication year was 2017, and both these articles can be found on EBSCOhost. So I'm not sure if you guys have accessed EBSCOhost before, but I'll give you a short explanation. So you should have a link to your MyEmbry already, which is a separate page from ECI and separate from your student email. So if you go onto MyEmbry, you'll see one of the links or one of the tabs on the top should read library. You click on that and it will open another page with some other options, and across that will be a set of tabs, right? And one says EBSCOhost. If you open that up again, the EBSCOhost page, you will find the search section of the online books and online journal articles, which you will need basically for not only this module, but I'm sure many of your other modules. So again, click on that, and then you can put in, it has various tabs open for either the author or the journal article, and you click on it and you'll find it on EBSCOhost. So again, just to summarize, go into MyEmbry, use your username and password, and click on library, and then get onto EBSCOhost. Right, then I've also added onto ECI something called the DIO, which is a digital online index. It's got a very long number that follows through the last DIO, and that is exclusive to the particular article I'm directing you to for reading. So each of the articles has a DIO number, and for that matter, so does every single textbook or ebook that is in the digital space on EBSCOhost. So basically, EBSCOhost is your big online library. And if you go to a campus and you can't find what you're looking for, you might find the ebook or article on EBSCOhost. Right, so just be careful, when you use these ebooks. There are obviously rules that go with it, and some, you're authorized to use it as a single user under the Everyday license or the Stadio license and present, right? But you may not copy or print or share or sell anything from there, or do anything illegal that infringes on copyright. These articles are basically only for your use as a student of Stadio. So, Yeah, so I think start off with the articles I've referred you guys to. Yeah, it basically has a critical amount of what geography means to primary trainee teachers and to teachers in one of it deals with teachers in England. So there's a great amount of growing literature on teachers' perceptions of geography. Yeah, and in short, what the article on Patrick Paramore and Guy found is that they did send out questionnaires to a large group of primary school teachers, and even though they knew this kind of research had been done previously, it hadn't been done in the decade that we're talking about, and they acknowledged that the research had been carried out before, and but they draw some interesting conclusions, right? In the literature review, they talk about, they say, amongst lecturers, there was an understanding of geography related to their professional training. So this would apply to teachers as well, who they reviewed, and it would depend on basically the academic background. In other words, how much training and what area of training have they got, how much of training have prepared them for geography teaching. So, it's lots of our geography teaching is also influenced by personal values. So the findings, according to Wilfred, who published in 1996, found that people tend to fit into more or less 4 categories of thinking about geography. There are those who interact and have a interactionist kind of idea about how people in places and situations relate to one another. Then there are those who like to take all the facts and then pull them all together and synthesize them. Then there's a specialist who likes to set out everything in maps and likes to know where everything is and everything is related to everything else in terms of mental diagrams. And then there's the placist, who is particularly interested in places and knowing as much as possible about these places, basically having a broad knowledge of these places. Then there's a different group of people, which Kettling in 2004 found. They were postgraduate trainee teachers who thought of geography as a study of globalist that develops an informed knowledge and understanding of the world, its human and physical features and environments in the countries of the world. And then these people who are, described as earthists of the earth, it's they look at the earth in the physical form, the environment and the forces and processes that shape the environment. And again, they found interactionists that felt that there was interaction between interdependency of people and the natural and social environments, and a process that sustain these relationships and of effects and influences as outcomes. The places were people who were interested in people's lives and activities and communities and cultures, to understand what they liked and why they are as they are and what this means for them and how they relate to others, which has got a strong tie, if you think about it, to modern anthropology. Then the environmentalists who are concerned about the environment locally and about sustainability, you can see, here with different kinds of research, they called upon and give them an idea of a background of how people view geography and also a background of their own study. Then there were also the critical theorists, who were a different group of people. You could say were interested in all of the things that Morley and Warford suggested. But let's look to radical and critical pedagogy, where there's an emphasis on doing things, of being involved in the community, not just knowing about them, but actually getting involved and trying to bring out some kind of change. So there's got to be a question about what we ultimately want to achieve. You can teach people about geography and they can, until they fall over and explode, but what is it that you want them to do with it? And this particular group, Patrick found that they were wanting to change the world from like by each person looking individually at themselves and how they could bring up change, whether it be in their own lives or in their communities. So they were quite critical about their own research, and they said that the way they had designed their research was that they'd ask teachers questions about what geography was, but they'd only give them very small boxes in which to answer the question. So they were only allowed 20 words per response box. And they said that if people, fill out in a small box, they're going to give you a small answer. So they were really quite hard on themselves, and they came up with the point that although other people had done this research before, nobody had done it in the way that was, not asking teachers about what geography is now or what geography could be. They were asking the trainee teachers about how they'd experienced geography themselves or, in school. And if you think about yourselves in the situation, you may have been out of school for maybe like 10 or 20 years already. And how is geography teaching and how has geography changed over the past period? And what have we come away with? What do we remember lost? And why is it so important as a trainee teacher to be questioning these things and trying to view things from different perspectives and also trying to update ourselves in all these different perspectives? Because many things have changed in our world and the way we look at it. And so our worldview needs to be altered as well. So still on that way, they went about their methodology for this particular research. If you leave a small box for people to answer, and it's not enough for them to get into detail about they actually think about geographies, then I suppose you have to think hard about the question. So yeah, it's basically if you have a paragraph and you don't have enough space, you just got one small box, you basically going to summarize it and get to the essence of what you're trying to say in from a paragraph to one sentence. Right, so I'm going to leave it here. I think I've given you guys much to think about, and what follows is basically the lecture. This lecture is you writing about what you think geography is. And don't worry, I haven't left a box for you. You can have the page. I think it's a one page typed, and you have to reference. And what I've said is you can do the references on the second page. Yeah, so feel free to use some of the ideas in this lecture. And yeah, that's about it. Let me just see if there's anything I want to add. Yeah, people. So I think get cracking on that assignment, and then you've got your involvement tracker 4 for this week, right? So I'll keep the involvement tracker open until for probably 9 days or so. But remember, this canned lecture is actually week 4's lecture, right? So hopefully it will be up by Monday, and then you guys can get started on that. But please, class task 1 as well, due on the 9th of May, just a reminder, and you will have 1 day's grace, so the 10th will be the last, and that's when the portal will close. Okay, so thank you very much, and we'll see you again in the live.